Good day, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you all for attending today's session on trauma, resilience, and resistance when institutions harm. And this session today will focus on the evolution of Mr. Amen. So our disclaimer for today is that this presentation was prepared for by INTAC under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. So in short summary, this information was prepared by myself and our guest presenter today. The information that we are sharing today is not supported or endorsed by SAMHSA or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This is information and perspectives that we have assembled for this session. So first, I'd like to introduce our facilitators for today. Myself, Dr. Tanisha Freeman Foster. I am the project director and change consultant with an INTAC team and also with Change Matrix. And also, I would like to introduce one of the mover and shakers in our community, Mr. Barack Amen. He is our guest facilitator for today. Barack, would you like to say something?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are you guys? It's great to meet each and every one of you, or should I say it's great to virtually meet each and every one of you guys. I am looking forward to being your presenter today, and I'm just excited. I'm excited.
Thank you, Barack. And we are excited and blessed also that you are sharing the gift of your story with us. So we're excited and looking forward to it as well. So just a quick overview for INTAC. Our multidisciplinary team consists of our partners at CARS, Texas, the University of Texas, Fredla, Georgetown University, MidStar Georgetown University Hospital, Youth Move National, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and Change Matrix. Our goal is that all children, youth, young adults, and families with emotional or behavioral health needs can access evidence-based treatment and recovery services in a well-coordinated system of care. So this is an example of who we serve. Essentially, it's everyone who's on the call today. Anyone who works with children, youth, young adults, families, and is interested in helping them be their best selves while simultaneously doing the work they need as individuals to build their professional skills. This work and this session is for you. Our services, again, including the session that we're providing today, we have several other webinars that we provide. If you are not already connected to our INTAC mailing list, I strongly suggest that you connect because you will receive information about our services. We also offer individual and group consultation, and we have 5 Things Digest and other podcasts that may be of interest and may be of support in the work that you're doing. So our session overview, today's learning objectives, we will work to increase knowledge of the understanding of the intersections and impact of intergenerational trauma and mental health. Participants will increase their awareness of institutional and systemic traumas and how they can be reduced. And also participants will learn through the power of personal narrative, the criticalness of engaging diverse and positive mentors for young people, especially young Black males. So just to ground us in our conversation today, we want to remind each of you that language matters. And we know growing up, a lot of times we used to hear that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And we know that that's not true. In fact, a lot of times the words hurt more than the sticks and stones. And so we want to be very mindful of our language. We want to make sure that the language that we use is strength-based and hopeful, that is inclusive of and accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, that it's healing centered and trauma responsive, and also that we invite individuals participating in their own journeys. We know for some of you, equity and trauma and resistance may be new, and for others, it may be something that you've been doing for several years. But wherever you come in today in your experience, we want to welcome you and invite you to this journey, and also remind you that we all have the opportunity to learn from each other no matter where we're at. We also want to make sure that we use person-first language that is free of labels. that we are non-judgmental and we avoid assumptions. Also, that we are respectful, clear, and understandable. And last but not least, that we make sure that our language is consistent with our actions, policies, and products. And that is a huge component of the work that we do. We want to make sure if we say that we are doing work that is in the best interest of young people and their families, that our actions and the policies and processes and products that we produce within our organization should align with that. So why is this topic so important? So we're going to touch on generational trauma. And history matters. Sometimes we like to focus on the present, but it's also important that we understand what happened in history. So essentially, when someone lives under chronic stress, certain genes are activated to help them stay alive. This is also known as epigenetics, and it refers to the ways in which our genes express themselves and are passed down to our children. So research shows that these effects can last for at least 3 generations, and that's if no additional trauma occurs for the children and grandchildren. However, we know that in our current society that people are traumatized on a daily basis by watching the news, by just navigating their everyday life, especially those who are Black and brown. And so this trauma continues. So we want to be mindful that when we see young Black and brown children, that they are just not presenting with the traumas that they experience as individuals, but they're also bringing the traumas with them from the past generations. And so we want to be mindful that that never stops, and that being resilient in the face of racism is not a viable option, but that we have to take steps to ensure that the processes, the procedures, and the things that we're doing in our work, and also those things that we do outside of work. How are we voting? How are we present in our communities? How are we trying to be involved to minimize the traumas? And so when we talk about trauma and we talk about institutions, there are 2 separate things that we can do. We can choose to exacerbate the trauma and create more institutional trauma, which is known as institutional betrayal or systemic trauma, where institutions that are supposed to be helping actually harm individuals who are dependent on their services. Or we can use institutional courage, where we commit to seek the truth and engage in moral action despite the unpleasantness, despite the uncomfortableness, despite the risk, and despite the short-term cost. It's a pledge to protect and care for those who are dependent on the institution. It is also a compass oriented to the common good of individuals, institutions, and the world. Ultimately, it is a force that transforms institutions into being more accountable, more equitable, and more effective for everyone. And so I know we went through that very fast, but these slides will be made available after the presentation, so you'll have this information to look at. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest speaker with this phenomenal presentation today, Mr. Barack Ahmed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, it is a great honor and a great blessing that I be here with you guys today to present. Ordinarily, I would introduce myself and start with a long list of accomplishments and things that I've done. But the first thing I like to say is, please keep an open mind. And also remember that I would rather that you not judge me by my accomplishments, but judge me by the obstacles I had to overcome to achieve these accomplishments and these goals of my life. This is my presentation entitled The Other Barack, The Evolution of Mr. Amen, and how I overcame obstacles and got out of my own way. The reason why I say got out of my own way, because a lot of us or people that we know have experienced fear of success, fear of changing, of leaving where we currently are to arrive at where we are meant to be. And that fear keeps people stagnant and frozen where they are. And this is a story of how I was unafraid to change my life for the better. Next slide, please. A lot of people ask me, who am I? And I like to say that I am a father, a husband, and a businessman. This is a picture of my wife and I when she was pregnant with our first child. I was blessed to remember the prayer that I prayed when I asked for the woman that I have today. And a lot of people say that they don't believe in love at first sight, but I got to say, when I first saw this woman, it didn't take all day to recognize sunshine. And she changed my life for the better. I remember meeting her at a call center when I was working there. I got there and she was there when I got there. She was there when I left. So I couldn't help but wonder, what was she trying to do? What was she trying to accomplish in life? But we went on to welcome 3 beautiful children. And we also had an amazing wedding. And when we talk about businesses, when we talk about some of the businesses that we had, I'm going to go into that a little bit later. But I'm excited. I've got goosebumps to go into this story to tell you guys, because I'm excited not only for where I've come from, but where I am at the moment and where I'm going. Next slide, please. Before all of those great things in my life, before I was able to meet my wife, before we welcomed children, before I started business, I was known as inmate RO5590, serving 4 years of my young life from the age of 19 to 20. I'm not ashamed of this picture or who I was at this moment, because if it wasn't for this time in my life, I would not be able to evolve into who I am today. I learned many, many lessons in life. One of the greatest lessons that I learned is that I am a terrible criminal. I make a terrible criminal, and that lifestyle is not for me. So keep this picture in mind as you look at this young picture of this 19-year-old kid, and then you look at me with this gray in my beard right now, and I'm going to show you how I made it from there to where I am now. Next slide, please. This is my timeline of my life's journey. I know it looks like a lot, but we're going to break it down into smaller pieces, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Now, a lot of people do know me from my entrepreneurial endeavors. They know me from my comedy career. A lot of people may know me from my engineering background, but this is something they don't know. So I'm going to start with the very next slide, and please, 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 like I said, remember that this was my life, and I was more than willing to not accept my current situation as my permanent situation. At the young age of 5, my mom gave me away. She was addicted to drugs. She had me at the age of 15, and her mom had her at the age of 15. We were in Fort Lauderdale, USA. We grew up there in the boom of the crack epidemic. And she was the pretty girl who was introduced to the drug life by one of the drug dealers in the community. And that is where a lot of our troubles begin. I don't hold any contempt with her for giving me away at the age of 5. I felt that she knew she couldn't take care of me in her current situation, and she knew that someone could do a better job than what she was currently providing. Again, I don't hold any contempt. A lot of people ask, well, how do you continue to love your mom after she gave you away? Well, not only did she have me at 15, my mom was also bipolar schizophrenic. So she was dealing with so many things within herself that I'm sure she had no idea of what was going on, but she knew that she did not want me to be subject to those things. And I'm thankful that she did want to provide more for me than what she knew that she could. She gave me away to family members whom I lived with for a period of times off and on, making my way to different family members' houses. And I'm glad I didn't have siblings. I'm glad that I was the only child, because it would have been even more of a sad situation that we had been broken up, living in different households, not knowing each other, not being able to spend that time together, but bouncing around from different family members' houses to different family members' houses. I felt like I was able to encompass love from so many different family members that I wasn't lacking anything. I was actually able to be filled with love from all of my family members, even though it wasn't of the best circumstances. At the young age of 11, I was sexually molested by a woman that was supposed to be a caregiver while my family was out. And oftentimes, a lot of people say that, well, since it was a woman, it wasn't the same. But I beg to argue that it is, because when you're a child and you're an innocent child and your innocence is perverted, I felt that it took away a lot of the intimacy of a relationship. Growing up older, I realized that the intimacy that I would later share with future girlfriends, and ultimately my wife was not one that was healthy. I had no idea of what true intimacy was. It was more of just an act, something that was transactional, something that was just the art or the act of, should I say. And we see that now with so many different adult movies and adult magazines and so much social media stuff that takes away the intimacy of actual romance. And that was something I experienced. And I had to identify with that to be able to acknowledge what I was experiencing and how could I make my way back to actual romance and intimacy in my relationships. As I grew up trying to deal with some of the things that I was experiencing in life, I wasn't quite sure because the people I talked to again would tell me, well, since it was a woman, it wasn't the same. Or you know, some of my uncles would say, boy, you got to get over it. That's life. But I was beginning to lash out because I wasn't aware of what was going on. Or I wasn't aware of the feelings that I was feeling in my young body. As I began to make friends and we progressing from elementary school to middle school, I lost one of my best friends to murder. It wasn't gun violence. It wasn't a stranger. He died at the hands of his father, who was also schizophrenic. He spent the summer with his dad, whom he used to tell me a lot of times that he hated going over there. He said he would despise going to his dad's house because his dad would always abuse him and say things and do things that he just didn't quite understand. Well, this summer between our elementary and middle school year, my friend went to stay with his dad, and his dad had an episode, and he began to stab the dog, the family dog. He began to stab the dog, and he told his dad, "Dad, don't kill the dog. That's my friend. That's my best friend. Don't kill my dog." Well, his dad turned around and turned on him, and he began to run and race around the house until he ran across the street to a neighbor's house, and his dad chased him in there and stabbed him in the chest 32 times. It was one of the worst things that I could ever experience was reading about this in the paper when I went to school that first year of middle school without my best friend, without the kid that I used to walk to elementary school with, the kid that I looked at my first adult magazine with, the kid that we used to get electronics and fix radios together, or back, I might age myself, but we used to find VCRs and fix them. I went to middle school without my best friend. It was one of the worst feelings ever to think of, actually reading the story and talking to the neighbor of how he died. It was something that I kept with me for a very long time. And I felt that hole in me. I felt that I was incomplete going into middle school. I began to lash out again, not really understanding the flood of emotions that I was feeling. Not only that, but the trauma that was continuing to happen to my young body, I was unaware of what was going on. The only thing I knew was to act out, lash out of anger. I would go to school every day. A lot of people didn't notice, as I oftentimes wore the same clothes. They didn't notice that my shoes had holes in them, and they would talk. A lot of kids would pick at me and laugh at me, but no one really understood what was going on. And then middle school is a pivotal time in a young kid's life, especially the first year of middle school, transitioning from elementary school. I was just unaware of what was going on. So I'm lashing out again, getting in trouble. All I knew was to fight, steal, take things. And then I got arrested at the young age of 12. That was my very first time getting arrested. I remember walking into a store. I was hungry. I had no money. I hadn't eaten that day. I walked into the store, and I remember, if you guys remember, I don't want to say the name of the grocery store. I might date myself again. It's an older grocery chain that's no longer around anymore. But I walked into that store, and I remember grabbing a rotisserie chicken, and I started to eat it and walking out the store hungry. I knew it was wrong, but at the time I just really didn't care. And they arrested me. I don't think they took the time to think that I was a hungry kid who was just hungry trying to eat, more over the fact that I had done something wrong. And I admit that I did something wrong, but no one stopped to ask me, well, son, when was the last time you ate? Or can we call someone to come and get you? I never got that opportunity. Next slide, please. Experiencing trauma, one of the things that I had gotten used to especially living in the community that I lived in Fort Lauderdale, USA. And I say Fort Lauderdale, USA, because South Florida seemed to be its own separate part of the world. Um, there was just so many different things going on around us that I felt that no one else in the world experienced, especially with the crack epidemic and seeing my mom go through the things that she went through. I felt that no one else understood. Hanging out at a young age with no one really checking for me or making sure I got inside the house at a certain time, or that I hung out with kids that meant me well. I started hanging out with some of, I'm gonna say, a bad crowd. I started hanging out with a bad crowd, kids that got themselves into so many different things because there was no one there. We had no fathers. There was no adult males around to check us about our behavior, to make sure that we were safe, to tell us that what we were doing were wrong. Well, one day, me and a couple of my friends are out on the basketball court playing basketball, and the other team lost, and a fight broke out. And someone pulled out a gun, and it didn't go the way he thought that it would go, and he ended up losing the fight. We all left on our bikes. We took off to try and get to a different location. Later that day, they ended up finding us as we were just hanging out, chilling. I remember one of my friends was on the phone, payphone, if you guys can remember how long ago that was. He was on a payphone talking to his girlfriend, and I was sitting on the bike with another one of my friends on the handlebars, and the car pulled up, and I noticed the guy get out of the front seat with the chrome pistol. He started shooting at us. We took off running, and my friend who was on the phone, I just remember him almost doing a front flip as we were running, and he hit the ground, and I remember bullets hitting the trees around us, and the car pulled off, and I look over at my friend who was taking his last breaths, just with a look that I'll never forget on his face while he gasped for his last breath. Not really sure what was going on around us, but I remembered that face that I saw, and I remembered, hey, these are the guys from that basketball court earlier. I was afraid to go home, because I felt that if they found us here, then if I go home, they're going to find me at home. At that particular time, I was living with my grandmother, whom I love with all my heart, and I didn't want anything to happen to her. So I decided to leave and live in the community where we live, not too far away from her, so I could still make sure that she was safe. But I wanted to be away from her home, so that way no danger would come to her. Being homeless from the age of 14 to 16, only eating what I could find oftentimes on trees or in the neighborhood, or what some of my friends would give me. I wasn't aware of what I was doing to myself. I wasn't aware of what I was doing to my family. Not being there, again, I was still lashing out, getting in trouble, breaking the law, doing things I had no business, because there was no one to care for me. There was no one to check on me. And one of the things I remember feeling inside was, I'm out here at 15, 14, 15, and 16, and nobody's coming to look for me. Nobody's coming to make sure I ate today. Nobody was coming to make sure I had somewhere safe to sleep, or that I had fresh clothes, clean clothes. And that was one of the most unsettling things that I could remember, was I was here and nobody was coming for me. Nobody was coming to save me. Nobody was coming to check on me. And that gave me a cold feeling in my heart that nobody loved me. Nobody loved me. Nobody cared about me or my health. I continued to lash out. Started to sell drugs in the community to try and make some money. But again, like I said, I'm a terrible criminal. I got arrested at the age of 16, spending my 17th birthday in the county jail. No one came to visit me. No one called. No one tried to check on me. One of the things that I remember most was going to the county jail as a juvenile. At the age of 16, going to the county jail. Most kids get a chance to go to JDC. I remember hearing a couple of my friends talk about how they got in trouble and they would go to JDC. I never got a chance to know what that was like. I went straight to the county jail, and I saw some familiar faces. I saw some familiar faces that I knew and I recognized, and it wasn't from a good situation. And while I'm in the county jail, I saw the kids that killed my friend. So being there in the county jail with them, it was a constant fight. Every day, wake up, it's a fight. Go to sleep, it's a fight. The only thing I knew was a fight. And it was crazy because we called the pod that we were in gladiator school, because that's all it was. It was a fight. It was a fight that you would wake up to the sounds of a fight. It was almost an everyday thing. So that switch in my brain turned on to say, well, let me see how good can I get at it? How good can I get at fighting? I became a part of my surroundings to survive. That was all I knew. I ended up going to a program, and in that program, I think it was a level 8 program. I was there for about, I think it was almost 10 months, after I had served my, oh, I'm sorry, before I go on I want to say one thing. While I was homeless at the age of 16, I graduated high school. So I graduated high school at the age of 16 while I was homeless. My grades were never an issue. I would go to school and sometimes I would get suspended for fighting, but I would always do my work ahead of time. I would get in trouble for talking in class, disrupting the class, oftentimes being the class clown, because I would get picked on for not having the clothes that everyone had, not having the shoes that everyone had. And sometimes the school lunch was all I ate all day. So graduating at 16 early, that meant no more school lunches. That meant no more food for me at school. But I graduated because my academics was never an issue. And I felt that I didn't want to have to be here, but I wanted to change my situation. And everyone would always tell me, you know what, you're such a bright kid. You've got such a bright future. And I used to get so comfortable hearing that. I used to get comfortable hearing everyone tell me, you know, it's just something about you. You're different than the rest of them. And that was something that I began to be numb to, until I was here at the age of 17 in a program, about to EOS, about to leave the program. However, I wasn't an adult yet. So at the age of 17, I could not be released without having a family member either pick me up or having an address to be released to. But at this time, I had been such a troublemaker. None of my family wanted me to come to their house. None of my family wanted me to come live with them because they either had kids that they did not want to be a part of my behaviors. They did not want me to rub off on, so they didn't want me to come live with them. And I understood. I thought that they were being tough on me. I thought that they were being too hard, that, hey, you're my family. You guys are supposed to love me. But I understood. I couldn't make anybody want to open their doors to me. After all, I had been used to sleeping in stairwells. I had been used to nobody coming to find me where I was. So I was like, all right. But it didn't dawn on me that if I don't have anywhere to go, I have to go to a higher level program. So when the officers would come and tell me, you know, we can't release you, there's nowhere for you to go, and we're sorry that this is happening to you. You're such a great kid. We wish we could do something different. We wish it was different for you, but it wasn't. So I remember that day that it was my day to leave. No one had called. No one had sent an address for me. No one had sent any info for me to come to. And I remember hearing the guard come down the hallway. And I remember hearing the sound of chains and shackles, handcuffs. And it had a certain ring to it. I mean, I had heard it for almost 2 years straight. So it was a familiar sound, but on this day, it seemed to be louder than ever, because I knew not only had I done what I was supposed to do, not only had I completed the program, but I have nowhere to go. So now I've got to go to a higher level program. I remember hearing the phone ring, and those keys and chains and handcuffs and shackles stopped. And they stopped getting louder. They started to turn around and go the other direction, and it got quieter and quieter. And then I remember hearing the footsteps and keys come back down the hallway again. And the officer came to me, and he had a look on his face. And I thought, well, no need to be sad, sir. You know, I understand. I'm okay. I had that feeling of toughness. I didn't want to let them see me cry. I didn't want to be weak, because I felt that I had to put on a tough face, because if he saw me be weak, then he's going to let them know wherever else I'm going that I'm weak. And then it's going to be even worse, because not only do I have to fight, but they're going to know that I'm weak because I cried because I had nowhere else to go. But he looked at me and he said, no, that's not it. He said, that's your mom. Your mom called and she gave us an address to release you to. And I got to say, that was one of the best days, because that was probably the only time that I can remember that my mom came through for me in my young life. And like I said, I wasn't ever mad at her, but at this moment, I felt a love and a happiness and a connection for her that I hadn't felt ever in my young life. I remember being on the bus going home, and it was getting off of the bus, and it was a bright and sunny day. And I remember getting off that bus, and she had on a white dress, and I swear it must have was fans, the wind blowing. I swear it was pigeons flying. It was something out of a movie. But I was happy to see my mom after all this time. I was happy to see her welcome me, and welcome me back to a place I had never been before. It's somewhere I'd never been before, but she was there, so I felt safe. I wasn't ready for where we were going, but I was happy to be out of handcuffs and shackles. My mom welcomed me to an address, and I remember when we got off the bus and we walked there, there was nothing really special about it, but I noticed that we didn't go through the front door. We walked around to the back door. And when I walked inside, it was dark. There was really no furniture, and it had a smell that was familiar from living in the streets and being familiar with the smell of crack being smoked. And I realized at this moment that my mom brought me to the crack house. And I wasn't mad, I wasn't angry, because I understood her situation. But it brought back memories that I wasn't ready for. I thought my life was going to change. I thought I was going to be able to become someone different. But being here brought back all those familiar memories and all of those things in life that I thought I was going to get a chance to be away from. So that being my environment, I got right back into familiar activities. One of the things that I do remember was I didn't want to stay there with her. So I went and stayed with friends. I met a couple girls that would let me stay the night at their house every night, or every other night, staying at a different friend's house. I didn't want to be there because I did not want to see her in that situation, but I wanted more for me. I didn't want to be there myself. Sometimes I didn't see her for weeks at a time. So I used to have to go back to that same crack house if I wanted to see her. One of the things that I remember most is that they wouldn't let me in unless I paid them or gave them some drugs. In order for me to see my mom, I had to pay somebody at the crack house to let me in. And that was one of the most hurtful things of my young life that I could remember, but it was something that I was willing to do just to see her. And again, like I said, I've never been angry at her. I've never held any contempt in my heart, because I've seen her do things that I wish I hadn't. But I've learned to never judge anyone else in life, because I understood the hand that she was dealt, and I understood what was going on in her life. So I understood what was happening in my life. So as I began to get a little older, I was able to make illegal money and pay for somewhere to live, have my own apartment, buy my own car. I had gotten in trouble again. Needless to say, like I said, I'm a terrible criminal. I had gotten in trouble again, and I ended up on probation. And I remember coming home one day, and my mom was at my apartment, and she was sitting there. It was a little bit, I think it was a little bit before my birthday. And she says, "I want you to meet somebody." So I was like, okay, all right, whatever. So I got in the car, and she didn't tell me where we were going. She just told me, turn here, turn here. And we began to travel a familiar route, a route that I had been on before. So I started to become a little apprehensive. Okay, Mom, where are we going? We got closer to the probation office, and I was like, "Are you going to turn me in? Like, what's going on?" I stopped the car, and I was like, "Mom, what's going on?" She said, "No, don't worry. I'm not going to turn you in, but I want you to meet somebody." So I'm thinking, okay, well, is she going to introduce me to a counselor or somebody that's going to try to tell me to change my life, that I need to stop selling drugs or something? And I'm thinking, how hypocritical of her. All of this is going through my mind at this moment. And I'm like, well, I'm not going inside. If you want me to meet somebody, you got to bring them outside. So I got out of the car, and I sat there on the hood of my car and waited for her to come back. And as she's walking up with a guy who looks pretty familiar to me, but I can say that I've never met him before, but he looks pretty familiar. We share the same height. we're about the same complexion. Our hair is the same. Our eyes are the same. And as he's getting closer, I'm like, we're about the same size. I mean, he looks very familiar, but I know I've never met him before. So as he's getting closer, he's looking me in my eyes. I'm looking him in his eyes. I'm like, yo, this is weird, but I don't know. So she says, I want you to meet your dad. And at that moment, I swear it's like all time stopped. And I'm thinking, why is he here? I noticed he had a work badge on and he was a probation officer for sex offenders. And I thought to myself, wow, this is my dad. This is the type of man who I would have expected to come and look for me, to make sure that I was well, to make sure that I was safe if he's in this position and this is what he does for a living. So we sat there and looked at each other for about a full minute and didn't talk. We didn't say anything. He could look at me and tell that I was a young man that was living a certain type of life. And I know what I look like. I understood. And at that time, I did not want him to see any weakness because I was so used to fighting and having a stone cold face that I showed no real emotion. And I asked him, I was like, well, what happened? Why haven't I never met you? And he began to say, well, your mom, and I had to cut him short, like, you can't say anything about her because you're a man. And if my mom never told you about me, or if you thought for any second that I was here, you should have come to find me. So I was like, well, let me get your number. Let me call you sometime, but I got to go. I got something to do. So he gave me a number and I sat in the car. My mom rode off and it was a quiet drive all the way back home. We didn't say anything. And she just said, I thought you should know. And that was it. I called him a couple days later and I remember the phone ringing and ringing and ringing. I think it was the weekend and the answering service came on. It was his work number. And I was upset. I felt the anger, like, you didn't give me your cell phone number or your home number. You gave me your work number. Okay. But I went back to that same place in my heart that I had no emotion. And I was like, well, it's okay. I don't need him. And it felt like that familiar scene from Fresh Prince where he was upset that his dad didn't want him. And I identified with that at that particular moment. I felt on my face, I had no emotion, but inside I was a ball of tears and emotion. But I didn't let it out because I had become so used to keeping my emotions inside and not letting anyone know how I was feeling that it followed me for a while. If I said that it didn't hurt me, I'd be lying, but it followed me for a while. Next slide, please. As I left that particular meeting with the man my mother introduced me to as my dad, I felt the familiar feeling of anger again. Anger, and I didn't know how to control it. And like I said, I realized that I'm a terrible criminal, but I got arrested again at the age of 19. And I remember thinking to myself, these were supposed to be my college years. I remember the judge telling me they're going to sentence me to 4 years, and I'm thinking, that's not so long. I was thinking that in the courtroom until they walked me back there and the door slammed. And I remember how cold it was. And I remember thinking, no longer in the county jail, it's no longer 6 or 7 months, it's 4 years. This should have been my college years. I remember thinking to myself, this should have been my college years, but I'm about to give 4 years of my life to the Department of Corrections. And at that moment, while I was sitting in that cold cell by myself, I said, I got to change my life. I got to do something different because I don't want to be back here again with the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, that I should have done something different. And I realized nobody is coming to get me. Nobody's going to come see me. Nobody's going to send me money. Nobody's coming for me. And that was a familiar feeling. And I had gotten used to it. Speaking of getting used to it, I got to say, one of the most uncomfortable things about being in prison for those 4 years was getting used to it. Getting used to being in a room the size of your bathroom, depending on how big your house is. Being in a room the size of a bathroom for 23 hours a day, I'm sorry, 24 hours a day and only coming out on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Being in that room with no TV, oftentimes no one else to talk to, because sometimes I would get roommates that we would get into fights. It's all I knew was to fight at that point in my life. So a lot of people didn't stay in there long with me. But I thought about it and I said, well, I want to change my life. I want to do something different. So the first year and some months of my life was spent on what's called CM, controlled movement, which is why I only came out on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 1 hour, and that was the shower. Getting out of CM, I made a phone call home only to find out that my younger cousin, whose birthday is the day before mine, had also been incarcerated, but he died while he was incarcerated. Now that feeling shattered my hope of changing who I am, because I felt that if he was incarcerated too, and he didn't make it out, then maybe I wasn't going to make it out. I didn't see any reason. My family didn't want anything to do with me because I had been such a troublemaker, and this was beginning to be a pattern for me. So I started to fight again. Going back to CM, I was familiar with what was going on, and it became to be my choice, somewhere that I wanted to be. And I started to think, well, I can't continue to do this, because if he died, and if I die, that's the end of the story for me. So I remember getting out of CM for the second time, my stay, and it was probably 2 weeks before my birthday is when I got out of CM. And everything was normal. I thought that I wanted to do something different with my life. I began to want to read different books. And I remember getting a page over the intercom. Excuse me. I remember getting a page over the intercom, and typically when they call you, they didn't call me to the front. They called me to the chaplain's office. Typically, if you get a page over the intercom, especially go to the chaplain's office, it's never a good sign. It's never a good sign. I remember getting in there and they were talking softly, which is something they never did. They talk to you like they're WWE announcers on a daily basis. So when I walked into the chaplain's office, they were quiet and soft-spoken, and they asked me if I knew who Alberta Hargret was. I said, yeah, that's my grandmother, this lady. And they said, well, we're sorry to tell you, but she's passed. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a sick joke. Why would you tell me this right now? I just lost my cousin. Why would you tell me that my grandmother is no longer here? And they asked me to come towards the phone, and they handed me the phone. And while I'm still trying to process it, I hear a familiar voice on the other end, son, asking the question, son, are you there? It's my mom. Now, I'd seen my mom go through anything that you could imagine a woman who had been in the streets, addicted to drugs, could ever go through. And I've never heard her cry, never seen her shed a tear, but I heard in her voice the shakiness and the tears in her voice. And she says to me, son, grandma's gone. She says, you got to do better so you can come home. I need you to come home in one piece. Your grandma is gone. So I thought to myself, okay, I got to change my behavior. I had to change where I am. And I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. And I remember some of the older gentlemen that were there telling me, they told me things that I couldn't really digest at the moment, but they told me this is a place you don't want to be because they can lose you here. And I didn't understand what it meant to be lost in the Department of Corrections. And I didn't want to find out either. So I started to write certain schools and colleges for books. I was very interested in business, trying to learn things to change my life. And I remember some of the books being turned around. I remember getting slips saying that people were trying to send contraband. And I'm thinking, contraband, what is? But it was just the CD inserts in the books. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you just take the CD out and give me the book so I can read the book? And then I realized, well, maybe they didn't want me to better myself. Maybe they wanted me to continue the cycle of coming back, realizing that the preschool to prison pipeline was successful. And why would they want to correct that? Why would they want to change that? Why would they want me to change my behavior or change my information that I'm getting? So why would they want me to change my life? Made me want to change my life even more, because I wanted to rebel, but I wanted to rebel in a good way. So I began to write the schools and request that they take the CD insert out of the books if it had one, so that I could get the books. I got the books from these different colleges and I read these books, and I remember getting out. I was able to go to work release, as a matter of fact. I'm thankful for that. I went to work release, worked the job. I got a paycheck. I EOS, and I came home, and my mom again had found a place for me to come home to. She had gotten an apartment on a move-in special. If you're not familiar with what a move-in special is, that's where it's a discounted rent for that first month. She had went to one of the local furniture rental places, and she had furnished it all on rental. Everything had to be paid. She had gotten utilities and everything. And I walked into this place and I felt much better, because it wasn't like the first place that I remember walking into with her when I was 17, I'm sorry. And I felt safe. I felt at home. I felt that it was something good. However, the first of the month rolled around. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that I was released from prison 2 days before my 24th birthday, which was the best birthday that I could remember. 2 days before my 24th birthday. I got out on a Sunday. I had a job Wednesday. I was proud of that. I was proud of that. It was a call center job, but I was proud of it. And I remember seeing a girl there, a beautiful, dark-skinned girl who was there when I got there, and she was there when I left. And I think that's what caught my attention before her beauty caught my attention, was that I noticed she was there when I got there, and she was there when I left. So we started to talk. We used to pass notes back and forth, and we used to talk. We want to sit next to each other. Well, in a call center setting, they didn't want us talking, because they wanted us to cycle through the calls correctly, rebuttal, do our second sale, pitch correctly. Well, we were so busy talking that they overheard one of her conversations, and they fired her because she wasn't cycling through the calls correctly. I remember seeing her get asked to leave the room, and I was like, oh no, y'all not gonna make me lose my blessing. They fired her, but they lost both of us, because I quit and walked out with her. And we've been together ever since. We've been together ever since then. 17 years we've been together, almost every day since then. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I don't regret any minute of it. At that age also, I remember my uncle telling me that, and this is going to sound weird because I know I'm from the South, but this is going to sound weird. I remember him telling me, hey, my son has a baby from your sister. And I'm like, what? What? Okay, that don't sound, and I'm thinking, I know his son, my cousin, and I'm thinking, no, that's weird. Plus, I don't have a sister. And he was like, no, not Junior. I had a son outside of my marriage, and he has a baby from your sister. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's weird, but okay, I don't have a sister. So he introduced me to my sisters, who, of course, we shared the same father, because he knew who my dad was. He went to school with my dad and my mom. So it was a weird thing. It was just weird, but I was blessed to meet my sister. And one of them actually committed suicide a couple years later. So that was something that I dealt with. And it was weird. But moving forward, my now wife and I welcomed our first child, which was the best thing ever because I never wanted to scatter my kids around the world. I wanted to know exactly that who my children were and that they were with the same woman. I didn't want to do the things that my father did because he had children from different women and I didn't want the same for me. And I didn't want the same for my now wife, which was my girlfriend at the time. I remember working in an electronics industry. I got a job with an electronics company, and I used to train the same people who would come in and they would get promotions above me. And I was like, well, I know that I'm smarter than them, but why are they getting raises and promotions and I'm not? And she says, they've got something that you don't got. And I was like, well, what do they got that I don't got? She says, they don't have a degree. So I was like, oh, okay. All right, I'm going to go and get a degree. I got my first engineering degree. And at this time, Obama was inaugurated to office and we share the same first name. My name is just spelled a little differently. There's no C in my name. And it began to be a hostile environment. So I quit my job to start my businesses, which was one of the bravest things I could ever remember. Next slide, please. At the age of 31, I married my baby mama. I wanted her to be my wife and no longer just referred to as my baby mama. In our community, you know, we'll go together for almost 14, 20 years. If you die, you'll be on the obituary as a special friend. Well, I didn't want that for her. I wanted more for her than what I had seen. I took a leap to create other businesses and welcomed our second child and started my first business. And I learned a lot from that. I lost a lot of money, but I learned a lot. I began to open a couple of different businesses, and just going through the business realm in life, I've learned so much over these years that sometimes it's not always about the success of making money, is what you learn. Just like I learned more from my prereqs than I did my core studies, I learned more from losing money in unsuccessful businesses than I did from making money. Moving on forward in life, my wife and I began to live life, and it seems that every 6 years we would welcome a child. Well, our son was born, and one of the greatest days of my life, someone that has my face, that has my name, that looks just like me. I was proud to be a dad, proud to be a father, to know that I am going to be the man for him that my dad was never for me. And people always ask me, well, Barack, we've seen your timeline, we've seen the things that you've been through. What now? People always ask, what now? Well, I plan to enjoy the life that I've created in time freedom by continuing to create businesses, continuing to work and create businesses for myself. One of the things I learned most was that after I got out of prison and after I've had businesses and after I've learned things, that the battle was not me against the world, it was me against me, that I am my only competition. The battle was not so much around me as it was within me. I had to listen to that voice inside of me tell me, you know what, maybe this isn't the best thing for you, or maybe you shouldn't do that. Or just because you can do something doesn't mean that you have to. Next slide, please. I also learned that after I got out of prison that I could not talk myself out of situations that my actions had gotten me into. And I had to put in real work navigating life outside of the gate. Now that I have to answer that little check mark on that application, have you ever been arrested for a felony? And I have to answer yes, which is one of the reasons why I started my businesses. And I wanted to go so hard because if I am my own business and if I am my own employer, I don't have to worry about that. As long as I do great business and stay out of the way, I'm okay. I can hire people that need these opportunities. One of the things also is that I identified with helping hands that wanted more for me than I knew that I wanted for myself. And I wanted to be that same mentor, that same helping hand for others, which is why I want to continue to use my voice. Next slide, please. People also ask me, why do I do what I do? And I say that everything that happened to me for a reason, because I want your sons, your daughters to learn from my mistakes. I want them to realize that their current situation is not their permanent situation, and they can be the architect of their future if they are just uncomfortable enough to want to change in their life. Next slide, please. Some of the things that I recognized that I needed for my younger self, if I could go back and talk to my younger self, or even my son, or that I want you guys to take away from this, are these 5 things. Growing up in the institutions growing to school or just growing up as a youth, I needed a trusted adult. I needed a father figure. I needed someone that I could talk to and tell what was going on in my life. A lot of times we hear the most toxic term that what happens in this house stays in this house. And I don't think that's fair because there's so much abuse, so much toxicity going on in a household that we need to be able to talk to someone. I also needed an educator in the school system and not a disciplinarian. I needed someone who wasn't trying to be a warden, someone who wanted to actually teach me. I needed someone to speak to that young engineer in me that could identify with my greatness. I remember my favorite teacher was my science teacher, Mr. Cobb, and he was my favorite teacher because he would identify that I was interested in electronics, or I was interested in certain things. And he would come to me when he saw I was getting frustrated and he would not let me give up. He would check on me. So those are some of the things that I needed. I also needed motivation, just to be myself, just to be who I am, my natural self. I didn't need someone told me that I'm speaking incorrectly and that I need to round my shoulders or that I need to be something different than what I was. Let me be myself so that I could evolve into who it is that I'm meant to be, not for their own comfort, but for my advancement and my growth. And lastly, one of the things that I wish that I could have just only had, that I could have only been, I just wanted to be a kid. I just wanted to be innocent without having to experience multiple traumatic experiences and later identify with multiple cases of depression from those multiple traumatic experiences. Next slide, please. So now for me, my life and beyond is I'm going to enjoy my family that I've been blessed with. I'm going to continue to travel around the world. I'm also going to continue to use my voice, continue to start another business, and I plan to retire in time to enjoy the life that I've built. And that has been the evolution of Mr. Amen, my life, my story, and how I got out of my own way. Again, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your presenter today. If you'd like to follow me, please, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm also on YouTube, Barack Amen. I hope that you guys were able to identify with some key points in my presentation today. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you guys. If there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Again, thank you so much.
My goodness, thank you so much, Barack. That was phenomenal. And thank you again for sharing the gift of your story with us. That is phenomenal. I think we can all take away some nuggets of some things that we can do with young people that we're working with today. So I will open the chat. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask?
I did forget to mention our nonprofit that is called Father Figures, Mentorship and Transitional Services. We do mentor youth, at-risk youth that are going through things in life. We do mentor with our motto is, our goal is to inspire and redirect at-risk individuals through masculine male mentorship. We believe that they are missing that masculine male mentorships in their lives, and we want to be able to fill that gap. So please feel free to find us or reach out to myself or Dr. Foster, and she can put you in contact with us. But if you have youth that are at risk that need mentorship, we are here, we are available, and we're excited to be of service.
Thank you again for your participation and for staying for after the session. This is powerful. And this recording will be made available. Right. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.